Today is April 27th, 2023, and this is POE World Order. POE refers to parody of extremism, it refers to Poe's law, and it's this adage about how any successful parody done too well becomes indistinguishable from the real thing, where it's kind of hard to tell if they're being serious or not. And the more I thought about it, as far as like this Tucker Carlson getting kicked off, I'm like, does this mean that he's going to go enter into a more real sort of media ecosystem where he's not controlled? And I'm thinking, no, not really, because he was never an extremist. Tucker Carlson has always been a Poe. I kind of think that all of these talking heads are tantamount to being parodies because they're all operating from the same faulty premise. They're all world stage puppets. It remains to be seen if he's actually cutting his strings. I kind of think no. I have this kind of theory that what they're doing with Tucker, because we know the 1-6 thing was totally fabricated top to bottom. It's totally a psyop. Anybody who says otherwise is part of it. And by letting him go, now he's got street cred. Now he's been fired by the elite media. And this helps maintain the false dichotomy of elite media and grassroots alternative media. The idea that there's a fundamental difference between Alex Jones and Anderson Cooper. No, I'm sorry, they're all same team. But now Tucker steps off the big platform and now he goes rogue. And it's like, okay, like Elon Musk, like he's really rogue, sure. He was head of the space program, leading man to Mars and all that. Yeah, there's no way he's on our side if you're considering that NASA is, one of the biggest arms of this juggernaut of just nothing. It's nonstop Psywar, and it's always been. Too many people think that NASA and space travel represents progress. No, it represents progressivism, insofar as NASA is just an excuse to advance this global communist environmentalism, which is what it ultimately amounts to. I mean, I do have some good news on that, by the way. Last year, we were talking about astrocrete. You know how they have this notion you can put your blood, when you go to Mars or the moon, you can mix your blood with the lunar dust or the Mars dust. You mix the soil with your blood and you make bricks, which they call astrocrete. And supposedly astrocrete is stronger than regular concrete. And I thought, this is sick. It's leading to cannibalism. It's the ultimate in self-sacrifice where you're literally giving blood for the community. But it's part of their ethos. I mean, they did make everyone do the blood pact with the state. That's ultimately what it represents. These little acts of self-sacrifice, whether it's a pinprick, a mask, or donating blood to make bricks. It's all part of this pathological collectivism, self-sacrifice. And, even cannibalism, maybe they're not literally doing it yet, but they're getting people to accept the premise. And that's ultimately what collectivism run amok becomes. It becomes very cannibalistic. Well, I've been thinking about this astrocrete thing as maybe this is how they create this bond between the first settlers on Mars or the moon with the soil. Like our forefathers died for this land. You have this blood connection now to the soil, to the land. Not a new concept. The Nazis did it. And it's kind of pertinent here then that the Mars project was written by, Mars, a technical tale, Werner von Braun, a Nazi. And when he goes into the structure of the dictatorship on Mars, the one that's run by the Elon, it's modeled off of Rome, of all things. There's a lot there we could tap into, but Nazis, blood and soil, space travel, something there stands out to me with this astrocrete beyond just how do we build better bricks. But the good news is there's a new study, there's some new reports that say they can create a better form of it using potatoes instead of blood. So instead of your blood, sweat, and tears, they can use potatoes. That's good to know. All right, let me go through some of your comments. I'm just giving people time to show up. I sent out text message notifications, and I'm expecting a surge. So far, I see about 43 people, and we're also live, infiniteplan.live, on a number of just audio players. In fact, we're also live on TuneIn. One of the new things, we're now live on TuneIn. The link is on the infiniteplan.live website, and it's monetized. If you want to help the channel, listen on the TuneIn app. And yes, I do get a cut of whatever advertising revenue they generate. Okay, we're joined by 737. Smarty Pants says hello from space. Joined by Osher06. Raku Calzone says text received. Linda Curtis is here. Poncho Lefty says finally caught a live one. Yes, and if you want to be certain to catch the live streams, get the text alerts. I am doing those again. It's worth the investment. It's like an advertising expense, but it's 100% worth it because it brings in all of the minds that comprise the think tank. And it's not just me. If it was just me to stamp this out, but if I were to, let's say, take a vacation or go into some other field, I'm pretty sure 5 or 6 other think tanks would emerge doing exactly what we're doing. Joined by Heidi Belanger says, hello, everyone. Happy to catch a live. Angst G says your text alerts are back. N2 Deep is here. Yes. And if you go to timosmond.art, I just want to put it out there. Yesterday, I wasn't live because a fakeologist was sick and we had a scheduled live stream. And I took the whole day off just to do artwork. And I'm listing a lot of it at timosmond.art. And I'm painting a lot of Penguinati. In fact, I have some small canvases there. Again, timosmond.art. All right, let's continue here. Joined by Lando Rock, Not Shocked, Polecat78, Harmon Walker, Napoleon Wilson, Watchdog, Angst G says, do you think the Fox News Dominion lawsuit settlement is as fake as the Alex Jones, Sandy Crook legal proceedings and resultant judgment? I think so. 1.6 billion for January 6th. I think it's all part of a structured kayfabe fake takedown of Fox. And this all ties in to the bigger story. We've seen this coming with that Alex Murdoch and his dynasty falling. When I saw that story plastered all over CNN, I'm like, wait, the name Murdoch are falling. That's foreshadowing. And now we're seeing it with Rupert Murdoch. Absolutely. And I think it's just like with Alex Jones. It's just like, hey, look, Jones has to pay, what, $1 trillion for the hurt feelings he caused. And then you have Tucker, who cost Fox like $787 million. Like, I don't think they're actually firing Tucker because he used bad words to talk about Sidney Powell behind the scenes. It's because of the money. I mean, Rupert even said that Fox isn't red. It's not blue, it's green. It's all about the money. It's a financial decision. But I'm pointing out here that I think it's actually part of a psyop in which they make it seem like there's still alternative media, that you have the elite media that represents elite interests, and then you have the grassroots, the us. I'm not accusing him of being a fake populist, but I don't know. I need a little more evidence to think that maybe he's more than just a brick in the wall. We shall see. Kevin Mooring says, Mars is underground, Elon's boring company. Yes, if anything, they're going to fake space travel underground. Like, yeah, they'll have this cylindrical blimp airship shooting up into the sky with the fireworks for all the dupes who are looking up. But the actual people going to Mars are going to be underground. This is why I've compared Elon Musk to Willy Wonka. You go through a tunnel and you end up in this other land where the Oompa Loomps live making candy. Well, if you remember when Musk was touting his boring company, he was also hyping up his candy company. He was going to do boring candy. And I thought, why would he conflate candy with his tunneling company? But then around the same time, he bought Gene Wilder's house. He bought Willy Wonka's house. And then and at that time, he was acting kind of goofy, dancing on stage in China, like doing a sort of a goofy dance. I mean, I'm just saying he was acting eccentric. And I remember thinking, they must be adding in a bit of Willy Wonka to his persona. And it's kind of interesting considering that in all likelihood, the Mars bases will be underground, deep underground Mars bases, dumbs. And you'll take his ride, just like Willy Wonka, in the tunnel, and then you get to go work for him making candy on Mars or whatever he's going to have you do. You'll be an Oompa Loomp for the Emperor of Mars. Harmon Walker says, I used to have a wrench. I don't know what happened. It was probably 33 channels ago. But if you comment, you will get a new one. If it's the IPR channel, on the Helmet Karen channel, I can't access it. I found a back door using streaming keys. Whenever I open a new channel, I save my keys because I know they're going to go after my main Gmail account to shut all my channels down, and it locks me out. So I might be locked out from actually going into the channel, but I can still stream on them. And that's how you see a lot of these streaming channels. River Stick says the use of blood and cement, mortar and concrete industry for obtaining a lightened material. Yeah, the Astrocrete concept isn't the worst thing they've thought of. You know, they're talking about, blood, sweat, urine, making bricks out of it. Yeah, that's not the worst thing they thought about. You don't want to know what Astrocrete is made of. I mean, I guess they need plasticware in space, but Astrocrete, apparently, according to science, the ISS orbiting the Earth at 17,000 miles per hour, 185 miles above our head, it has a lot of waste products that are tossed out. And apparently it accumulates on the outside of the thing. They got to squeegee it. And apparently they have enough, waste matter from the astronauts that they can recycle it. And they're turning it into plastic, astroplastic, made from astronaut fecal matter. Yep. Sorry, but that is, like I said, Astrocrete's not the worst thing they've come up with. Hillman Avenger says, hi, Tim and Penguinati, beaming sunshine to you all. The chemtrails are blocking it. I actually went out and I saw the manager of the place I'm at photographing the eastern horizon. And I looked and I just saw a whole lot of planes and condensation trails. And I'm pretty sure she's a chemtrail conspiracy theorist. She didn't have any vinegar. She wasn't spraying the sky, but she was definitely photographing these trails with great interest. Now, I'm a contrail theorist. My theory goes against the conspiracy theory of chemtrail. I think it's actually condensation. And the reason I think so is I was looking at the study where they found 18% of flights exhibit this, and it's pretty much atmosphere and altitude dependent. Cult member 96 has joined us. Thanks for joining. Mom with Sons, Exotic Matters, says Russia does not threaten anyone with nuclear weapons. Satan 2, he was wagging that thing around all last year. And for the most part, I think people got distracted by Ye. I mean, that's when I realized that the world stage media doesn't just use a spotlight to direct our attention. Now, in the attention economy, there's so much more competition that they use a laser pen and they condition the public to respond like a cat. And they sadistically point the laser all over the place, keeping the cat running around. And when you finally catch the red light, what happens? It moves. You can't catch it. You can never catch it because the world stage media will never liberate you. It's always there to hook you in. It's part of a story. They wrote your history in advance. These are news benders, just like the play from 1968 about how the news media secretly bends the news 5 years in advance. No, they bend it generations in advance. Look back. How many generations have they been preparing us for an alien invasion? And how much of the predictive programming and psychological warfare is really just based on older operations that serve the same purpose? I mean, you can't tell me global warming isn't just a modern flood myth, especially when you look at NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's symbolism, the dove, the ark, the warning satellite. It's all just recreating the myth of Noah. In the age of space arcs, Dave Hutchins says, link for text message, please. Okay, what I'll do here is I will post a link for the text messages and I'll send it out on the next newsletter. So sign up for the newsletter. Text alerts are free for you. Joined by Salty Siren, Oswaldo, Alt Easy. Linda Curtis says, Elon's the most boring genius I've ever heard. You know, the other day, I think I heard, maybe it was Fakeologist, it said something about Musk being an actor playing the role of a billionaire entrepreneur. And when I was really heavy into e-commerce, before I figured out the earth probably wasn't a ball and I got distracted by conspiratainment and reality, I was heavily immersed in a lot of videos about how to succeed in e-commerce. And I used to listen to entrepreneurs just for the inspirational value. How did you get there? What obstacles, and et cetera. And I found that successful millionaires and billionaires, the self-made type, are usually incredibly interesting. And I have to agree that it's almost like, I mean, I've seen this before, Emperor's New Clothes, where people in the chats will be watching Musk speak. This was true before he bought Twitter, when the left still liked him. And he would be talking and he would be saying, and it'd be very vague. But people in the chat would say, well, he's such a genius, then he has to dumb it down so we can understand it. He's having to slow his mental machinery down so that we can grasp it. That's the Emperor's New Clothes. Because no, you're right about that. I think most geniuses aren't boring. Hillman Avenger says, here's a deep dive into Tucker's history. Mintpressnews.com, Tucker Carlson biography, Nicaragua, CIA. Yeah, I heard him mention that he applied at the CIA, which is just a nice way, or it's like an indirect way of saying he's in the CIA, I think. G says there's going to be a new Willy Wonka movie released later this year. It'll be an origin story. You know, a good Willy Wonka story it's the follow-up to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And it's called, what is it? It's the one with the train, Snowpiercer. And it's the train as a metaphor for the ship of state. But basically, global warming's destroyed the world and everything's cold and frozen and iced over. But luckily, there's this train that never stops. And it's a real interesting story. It's kind of about a closed system, cannibalism, everything that we've been talking about so far. And it's Ed Harris, Christoph from the Truman Show. He's the conductor of this train. And they're secretly eating the people at the back. But it turns out, if you look at the subtext, the entire story is actually a follow-up to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's when he grows up. But another one of these movies about global warming, climate change. Joined by G33, Joe Raw. It'll be about how he fell in with the Oompa Loomps. Okay, that should be interesting. Yeah, if you go into the Mars bases underground, if you buy your tickets to Mars, yeah, you might actually think you're going to Mars, but it's all going to be CGI. But look, they have already demonstrated that people can be tricked into thinking that they're traveling in space. This has been demonstrated in a TV show called Space Cadets. It was a hoax, but it was like this 10-episode thing where these 5 contestants thought they were going to low Earth orbit, and they were fooled. Now, how did they pull this off? Because obviously, it'd be easy to figure out you're not really traveling in space. Well, they had 10 people go to space, 5 were actors, 5 were dupes. Now, this is how the media works. And this is how they gatekeep our reality, where the people who are dupes aren't allowed to communicate because they might connect some dots. And connecting dots is, committing thought crimes. And in order to prevent them from connecting the dots, they were kept separated. And they didn't know that they were being gate kept, essentially censored. They were being prevented from making the connections. But that show proves that you can fool people into thinking that they're going into space. And, people look at the fake news today and they say, are they letting us know? Like I saw these tweets about the astronauts on the ISS and their harnesses constantly catching on to their tight polo shirts. So you can often see them making these errors. And people would say in the chats, they must be doing this on purpose. They're letting us know it's fake. They're sending a clue to some of us because they're tearing down the system. This is the awakening. And I'm like, no, this is not intentional. This is not benevolence. These are bad liars, but we've never been able to corroborate. We've never been able to compare notes real time like we have been recently because of the internet and social media. In other words, they've always been terrible actors, but they just haven't been criticized. They've been insulated from criticism until now. All right, going through your comments. Harman Walker says, IPS, could the chemtrail story be a cover for a new technology of the jets using way less fuel, but the byproduct is the trails we see? I've considered this. I considered if the airline industries were actually using compressed air and not jet fuel, maybe a little jet fuel for cover, for warming the cabin. For the most part, the jet fuel hoax conspiracy theory makes sense because, it would make sense that if they were using something other than jet fuel, if they were using this compressed air technology, and it did have a stronger effect on the atmosphere, leaving these condensation trails, what better way to cover it? If anybody looking too closely at the whole jet fuel thing, misdirection, in other words, like, could it be a byproduct for some secret technology? Possibly. Although I still think condensation trails make more sense than anything I've heard so far. Even, look, I'll go into it later. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but because right now there are people out there like Crow 7777 who claim that you can dispel chemtrails with vinegar. And I just think that these types of claims require a little more substance to back them. Otherwise, I don't know. We'll get into that. Does anybody here believe that? If you believe that you can go to a picnic and you wave a pickle at the sky and now it turns blue, let me know. Kevin Mooring says, do salt and vinegar chips make the chemtrails disappear? Well, he claims there's some kind of chain reaction, whatever that means. Riverstick says, I recently watched a jet with no contrail flip the switch and proof there was a contrail. Interesting. I'm pretty sure it has to do with altitude, but okay, let's see here. You can pray them away. Yes, I've seen people pray at chemtrails. In fact, I know a couple Canadians, Ronnie and Johnny, and they claimed that there's real planes and safe condensation trails, but the chemtrails come from demons in the sky manifesting holographically as planes. I've heard it all. But I think that the vinegar, the boiling vinegar, cleaning up your skies, making them blue, that's got to be one of the biggest leaps I've seen in a long time. And here's how it works, though. It's about suggestion. Someone tells you, someone with authority, like Crow 777 says, yeah, if you boil vinegar, it'll get rid of chemtrails. Well, now it's in your head. Okay, let me try it. Then you boil vinegar and you put it outside and the chemtrails disappear a little while later. Hey, Crow was right. Or was he? The flaw here, it's faulty causality. The chemtrails were going to go away anyway. You can't say it was because you put the vinegar out there. They've always gone away. If you've noticed, the clouds aren't all that static. They tend to dissipate. But to say that it's because of what you did requires a bit of faulty causality. And it's that causality I need. Joined by P Trippa 103. Thank you for joining. 6079 Smith is here. It says National Aquatics and Scuba Association. Oh yeah, you can't get into NASA unless you're a scuba diver. I read that book by Mike Massissimo called Spaceman. And this is strange. Maybe it's a coincidence, but when I started my YouTube channel, one of the first subjects I focused on was the symbolism inherent within NASA's rockets and missions and how it correlates to Mystery Babylon, that it was some kind of obelisk symbol. And as soon as I started talking about this, I started putting these pieces together. This book called Spaceman just was handed to me. I was at work one day, I was on break, and I arrived back at the desk I was at the counter. I was a cashier, and someone said, yeah, someone came in during your break and left you a copy of this book. And so I pick up the book, and it's called Spaceman, Mike Massissimo, and I open it up and it says uncorrected proof. The book hadn't been released yet. I actually got an advance copy. Someone hand delivered it to me. And it was really strange at the time because it was, maybe it was like a message, I thought. But anyway, I read the book, and 90% of it was about this soon-to-be astronaut overcoming his fear of scuba diving. And when he actually went into space, at the end of the book, the last chapter, he describes it and he says, yeah, it felt a lot like being in the neutral buoyancy pool training. Like, he compared space to being in a swimming pool. And I thought, well, that's his only basis for comparison. Going through your notes here. 6079 says, Tim, I'll gladly do a StreamYard live. Okay, StreamYard's good. And I can also take guests on restream.io. That's how Fakeologist and I have been doing it. But I'm definitely open for, I wanted to do panels, but at a minimum, I want to do more one-on-one topic-oriented discussions. So definitely get in touch with me if you want to set something up. 737 says, Jerry Springer has left the stage. Yeah, I heard a lot of that stuff was fake and staged, but it was tremendously entertaining. He was very charismatic. I don't know much about him other than his show, but yes, I saw he died at 79. Very, very hilarious content. I go back to those videos all the time. Let's see here. Demetria 101 is here, says 201 is 311 in base 8 counting. Now, look, I'm not so much into Demetria specifically for my purpose here. For the purposes of commentary and metascript analysis, I'm more interested in the obvious patterns that we can point to that are irrefutable. And we stick to those a lot of the time. And I recognize, though, that behind it is this symbolic system, and we're constantly decoding it, and it's all there. 6079 says, next year will be the 248th anniversary of America. Kevin Mooring says, Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. Benton says, I want to hear from Lynn. Lynn, oh yes, Lynn is likely to call in when I get the phones back on. Joined by Portal Complex says, sound on. Probably not for you, but I would say refresh. And then if you miss anything at all, get on the newsletter. You'll get a link to Text Alerts 1, and 2, you'll get the latest archive. Okay, I want to get into the topic that I pointed out earlier about Jamie Foxx, because this is sort of big news. Let's talk about the Fox script. I had previously remarked on Jamie Foxx's medical issue, and this was on 4/13, like last month, that something happened. He had some kind of a collapse. He had a medical issue. It was on CNN. And the only reason I noticed it is I was looking at, no, it's Jamie Foxx. I was looking at the CNN, and Jamie Foxx is on the screen on a commercial for some eyeglasses. There's an owl wearing glasses, and then there's Jamie Foxx, and he's got one eye kind of covered. And I'm like, okay, what is this? Then the next thing I see on CNN, there's a story about him, about how he's 55 and he's collapsed. So Jamie Foxx, 55. The owl and the eyeglasses, that's just a coincidence, I'm sure. But I look at these actors as the archetypes that they represent. I used to call it Hollywood archetype casting. They create these characters, they build them up, and they use them to platform certain ideas. So I thought, well, what is Jamie Foxx's reason for suddenly being like center stage, not just in the commercial, but the storyline here? Well, I see his age is 55. Now, this was shortly after the 55th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination. And this is where it all ties together. Jamie Foxx, this is from the news today, that he was actually non-responsive and he had to be, quote, brought back to life. So here's the meta-scripted message. He's a key figure in the BLM movement. One of the first things. He got behind the Trayvon Martin protests, and that kicked off BLM. He played Django Unchained, which connects to Ye. Ye claims that Django Unchained was his idea, that it was stolen by Quentin Tarantino and Jamie Foxx. It also ties him into Christopher Dorner, the police officer who went on a shooting spree to protest the racist police department, the LAPD. His name was Christopher Dorner. The names are very significant. Christopher Dorner, 33, was incinerated by law enforcement. So you have the Burning Man, 33, and the Christ all tied in there. And as he was on his shooting spree, Professor Mark Lamont Hill gloated about how it was like Django Unchained in real life. I mean, this was concurrent programming, but they made these comparisons on purpose. Django Unchained is based on the story of Nat Turner, who was the enslaved African-American preacher who organized and led a 4-day rebellion in Virginia. So here you have again, Jamie Foxx, 55, key figure in the BLM movement, in the news, dying and resurrecting. He played Django Unchained, who ties into Nat Turner, Christopher Dorner. Again, 55 years ago, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. So it seems to me that there's a theme here with this martyr, some kind of a martyr ritual or something. On 4/4/2023, Donald Trump was arrested. This was the 55th anniversary of MLK's death. It was Holy Week, and Trump was blatantly Christified. If you remember, even on SNL, they nonstop, they were associating him with Christ, even his own followers. Why would they do this? I'm saying it's part of this bigger storyline. All the 55 synchronicities started when Tyree Nichols was killed and the protesters shut down I-55. That's when I picked up on it. Then the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., again, whose dad died 55 years prior, joined for Tyree Nichols' memorial services. And they went to Mason Temple, where MLK gave his speech before he was killed. Then, at the same time, this Tyree Nichols, his beating and subsequent death, it was likened to the Rodney King beating. Now, Rodney King, again, Martin Luther King, Rodney King. And how many times, anyone here want to guess, how many times was Rodney King batoned? You can find this on Wikipedia, so you know it's true. Yes. If you answered the 33, Rodney King was batoned 33 times. Now, moving forward, the name Fox has two X's. Now, what does that mean? Well, I've described the number 4 and the meaning of it, how they use this symbolism, like the number 44. And I'm suggesting that number 44 and XXs are used in a lot of predictive programming to denote a double cross. 4 is the cross, symbolic of 4 seasons, the solar cross. You have Jesus, the Son of God, or the Sun God, on the cross. Now, the double cross symbol represents the second coming. The first is the death, the second is the resurrection, the 2 bars. And I'm saying that the name Fox even contains that double cross. And he went into this death and resurrection rite just now. Now, there's more. Now, to continue here, the accuser of Emmett Till just died at 88. Now, this is Carolyn Donham. If you don't know the story, the death of Emmett Till was incited when this, and this is like the proto-Karen. This story has already been compared to, has already been brought up in that context of the whole Karen phenomenon that was highlighted in 2020. They said the reason why Karens are so bad is it's the epitome of privilege, a privileged person wielding it like a baton. And what happened is a 14-year-old named Emmett Till, black, made a complimentary pass at Carolyn Donham. He hit on her, or he supposedly complimented her. Whatever he did, it was misconstrued, and it was this compliment that turned into a lynch mob going to his house and killing him. So her Karenness, her outrage, is what triggered his death. Now, she died today at 88, or yesterday. The significance of Emmett Till is that his death kicked off the civil rights movement. So a couple of salient points here. Trayvon Martin's death kicked off the BLM movement. He was compared to Emmett Till. Emmett Till kicks off the civil rights movement. Now, interestingly, Ye West compared himself to Emmett Till. And of course, he connects to Django Unchained and Christopher Dorner. And here's another connection between Ye and this Christopher Dorner thing. Because, you know, he compared him, or he says he wrote Django Unchained. He claims it's his idea. Well, during the Django Unchained movie release and all this, you have the Christopher Dorner. Christopher Dorner was incinerated at 33. Now, this is all part of the body of symbols we often see correlated. The number 33, King, Phoenix, Christ. These are always correlated in these rituals. So it's notable that in Ye's Dawn Day ritual, and this is the one that occurred on the anniversary date that they usually held Burning Man festivals, he emerged on fire, Phoenix-like, from a burning house. Just pointing this out that, again, Ye compared himself to Emmett Till. said he was being lynched by powerful business people. That's a correlation because Christopher Dorner said that powerful people in the LAPD prevented him from being promoted. So we're talking about somebody rebelling against the system. Trayvon Martin compared to Emmett Till. George Floyd was compared to Emmett Till. Here's from the Chicago Sun-Times. Will George Floyd's death with the knee on his neck become the nation's Emmett Till moment? Now listen to this. The Black Chicago teenagers lynching in 1955 ignited the civil rights movement. Another 55 there, just pointing it out. One other connection here. The name George etymologically derives from tiller, like soil, a farmer. There might be some significance there. But here's my big takeaway. Jamie Foxx's role in the cult of the martyr, in which the PSYOP entertainment complex is even now creating a Black Christ as a central character in a broader narrative. And this is referred to in the Donde Burning Man ritual. And here's what he actually said about it. This is on February the 13th, 2022. Kanye West said, Donde 2 is about running back into that burning house. I respect not everyone's going to be ready for the smoke. Now, this ties into Martin Luther King Jr.'s statement, quote, I fear I am integrating my people into a burning house. Now think again, King, burning house, Christ, as in Christopher Dorner, 33, burning house, rebelling against the racist system that is not letting him integrate. And here's the symbolism to note here. The name King, conspicuous 33s, Burning Man, Phoenix, and Christ references. My takeaway here is I suspect that the Great Reset will introduce a new Christ. Perhaps not one person, but an amalgamation that creates an archetype that epitomizes the victim of the system. This is the central sacrificial martyr, and it's going to be the main catalyst for a revolution against the West, which is construed as intrinsically rooted in oppression and pollution. You notice that it's like George Floyd, I can't breathe. Mother Gaia, I can't breathe. And why? Because of the West, capitalism, and the police state that it requires to defend the propertied class. It's bad for the poor and it's bad for Mother Earth. Again, we're talking about the creation of a martyr to be used as the basis for a rebellion against an empire, against a system. And this Black Christ symbolism has been central to this narrative, and they've been building it. I mean, look at the recent one, Jayland Walker, shot by 8 cops 46 times. The 846, that's the time 9/11 started. 846, George Floyd has the knee on his neck. These numbers are not coincidental. Falling, about the West falling. And even the name West, Ye, West, burning, the West, his house burning, that's all tied into this. Ye's Burning Man festival, his house burning, ties into Westworld and the revolution of the synths. It ties into Game of Thrones, Westeros burning. This was a theme we covered last year, but it was pretty heavy last year. And I'm suggesting here that we're looking at the rationale for a revolution, and ultimately it's this Black Christ martyr. So I don't think there's going to be like another Jesus that shows up and dies, but they're creating this narrative, and it's woven together pretty well. That's why I pay attention to these celebrities and what they really represent and what they're really used to communicate. You can find the article. I posted all the links and all the notes there at timosman.blog. Kevin Mooring says Jamie Foxx has a new movie called Back in Action. So he just went down, but he's going to be back in action. Fascinating. 6079 Smith W says the 119th day of this year on Saturday will be the anniversary of Rodney King. It'll be 11,322 days since. He says Tyree Nichols, like Tyree, like tire, good year. Yeah, that's how they spell tire in the UK. And I did notice, and maybe it's not a big clue, but I noticed during the George Floyd PSYOP, when they were kneeling on him, there was Goodyear tires. And the word tire, Tyre, that ties into Hiram of Tyre, as in Hiram Abiff, the central martyr of the Masonic ritual. And the kneeling is part of that ritual. You saw it with Damar Hamlin. You saw it with George Floyd. It's about Hiram Abiff, Hiram of Tyre. That's why, or Tyree. That's why Tyree Nichols. Tyree Nichols ties into the story. And this is not something that can be disputed. The symbolism ties in. It correlates perfectly with these rituals. For example, and I brought this up the other day, how old was John Belushi when he died? How old was Chris Farley when he died? A lot of these high-profile celebrity deaths are always seeing the same type of numbers, and the hallmarks are always the same. In this case, 33. But then you have Phil Hartman, died at 33. And not at 33, died at like 46 or something, but he died at 3 in the morning and he was shot 3 times. So they have to get that in there. But I'm like, wait, he was shot 3 times, 3 in the morning. And I looked it up just to double check, was it 3:30 or 3? It was 3. But then I saw that they said he was shot in the forehead, in the throat, and in the chest. Head, neck, and chest. That's where Kennedy was shot. Head, neck, and chest. That's where Hiram Abiff, Hiram of Tyre, that's where he had his injuries in the Masonic ritual. It's the neck, it's the chest, and it's 3. What is that? All right, let me continue here. Rocco Calzone is here. Thirst for Truth. Benton says it's a coincidence. Nicotrauma says, crap, I'm way behind. Like I said, you can catch up. I'll be sending out the newsletter with the archives right after. April 27th, hazardous materials on board. Another train derails into Mississippi River. Yeah, that's a good one. A commenter here says, Goodyear calls their blimp the November 3 Alpha. Yeah, that's what I was noticing here. That's why I remember looking at it. The Goodyear blimp was significant for a few reasons, but one of them was the call sign on it, which is 11-3A and 11-3-311, just like 9/11 or 119. These are always associated with the Major League PSYOPs. Demetria 101 says Tyre was a Phoenician city. Yeah, and think Phoenician, Phoenix, the color purple. Like you'll notice Holy Week, they put the purple robe over the crucifix. I happen to think that ultimately behind all this symbolism is the same exact cult of the phoenix, the cult of the reset. I mean, that's what a phoenix is. It's a reset symbol. Burn down, build back better. The dove, it's another phoenix representation. It's got the olive branch. What does it represent? Well, God flooded the world, and when the floodwaters recede, the dove says, okay, it's time to start over with your ark, your reset. Then you have, Lady Gaga was dressed up like the Hunger Games character, and she's wearing a dove on her chest. Well, in the Hunger Games, they have a symbol of the mockingjay with the arrow, looking like the dove with the olive branch, but it's burning like a phoenix. The burning bat as phoenix. You have the Crow movies with the raven. You have the movie Songbird recently did this, but it's a reoccurring theme. I mean, even the American eagle is a phoenix. All right, moving on here. Going through my notes, a lot of things I brought up here. I brought up Nat Turner, again, enslaved African-American preacher who organized and led a 4-day rebellion. That was 1831, if you believe the history. But this is part of the basis for Django Unchained, but also the Turner Diaries, I believe, is a reference to that. It's all reference to the same thing: black-white race war, black-white Masonic Hegelian dialectics, using race as a cover for societal transformation. Yurt Mama says, sorry I'm late. I was out in the sticks with no internet. Yeah, I was out touching grass the other day. I've been going out in the parks and I'm doing watercolors now. If you go to timosman.art, you may see some of those show up. I did a painting of Trump. I did an oil painting of Donald Trump at his arraignment, and none of the MAGAs bought it. I'm wondering if they're tapped out. All right, moving on. Very interesting article from Jim Stewartson. If you don't know who Jim Stewartson is, he is a blogger who has been anti-QAnon from the beginning. And he's arrived at many of the conclusions that I have arrived at with regard to specific individuals within the movement, like specifically General Flynn. And General Flynn is a major leader in this Q movement, but he lies about it. He sued CNN for saying he was part of Q, but he's out there in front of it selling Q merchandise. He actually trademarked digital soldiers, which is a Q thing. He's taken the Q oath on camera. The idea that he's not part of Q is ridiculous. It's a patent lie. He is. Well, Jim Stewartson was hit with a legal threat. They actually sent him a letter. And so I'm going to read what they put in here, because everything that Jim Stewartson accused General Flynn of is actually true. Dear Mr. Stewartson, I represent General Flynn, retired, and in pursuant to blah, blah, I intend to commence a lawsuit against you for your defamatory comments about him on your Twitter feed and your podcast. I'm like, okay. Nice to see these free speech absolutists ready to sue the first person to be critical of them. It says these statements include, but are not limited to, accusing General Flynn of committing treason and domestic terrorism, which he does, being a Russian asset, I don't know, but here's where it gets good. You accuse him of executing a violent insurrection, being a follower of Satan, being a leader of QAnon, being a Nazi, waging psychological warfare on the American people, and using ISIS radicalization techniques on the American people. Now, those are the parts I agree with. I can show you where General Flynn is invoking a New Age prayer to the seven angels of the rays of Saint Germain or something. I mean, strange New Age channeling cult, the Church Universal Triumphant. He uses their prayers and has the QAnoners repeating it. That's not a small deal at all when you look at this group and how it led all of its followers into bunkers because they believed that China and Russia were about to nuke us. That was in the late 80s. And of course, the cult didn't really fall apart because they assumed they had prayed the nukes away. Anyway, the Church Universal Triumphant has been repurposed into the Church Universal Trump. And similar to the Q movement, it contends that there's a deep state. They call it it's like a war in heaven between the Great White Brotherhood and the forces of darkness. Now just replace that with white hats and deep state. It's the same thing. Now, if you want to fight the deep state, what do? You go onto the chans like 4chan and 8chan, and you talk to the dead celebrities like JFK Jr. and Michael Jackson they're going to come back and they're going to save us because they didn't really die. They just went behind the scenes to fight the deep state. Well, in the Church Universal Triumphant, they claim that there's a lot of people that have ascended but chose to stay behind to help us. So they're not dead, but they left the world stage. And what I'm saying is that he repurposed that doomsday cult and replaced ascended masters that you can channel with dead celebrities that communicate through the chants. Then when it goes into the ISS radicalization charge, well, yeah, absolutely. General Flynn has bragged about his role in radicalizing Islamic groups, waging war in Afghanistan. And I've said for some time that they have done in America what they did out there, that QAnon is just the domestic counterpart to the ISIS or the Quranic radicals. And there are direct correlations, whether you look at the incel or the suicide bomber, the war against the deep state, the war against the great Satan. Their values are fundamentally the same, the MAGA ban and the Taliban, but it's a deliberately created construct in order to frame an entire group. And look what they've done. But I found some interesting information on this Jim Stewartson's Substack, where he does back up all of his claims. It's not defamation to say that General Flynn's a Satanist and a leader to Q. He absolutely is. But he has a PDF here where it's showing all the different ways that they're able to wage this info war, or what Flynn calls a narrative war, with bots and with online manipulation in places like Twitter. So listen to this. This is talking about how you can amplify a message. This is a tactic used by QAnon. This is an actual PDF from this thing General Flynn shared. And it says deployment, the chessboard. You have 10,000 accounts. 55% of them will be numbered bots with minimal history to quote, seed, swarm, and boost. These are the pawns. Now, if you ever go on Twitter and you'll see these QAnon accounts, the names like Jimbo557 and Betty3339, and these are just generic accounts that are nonstop reposting Q drops from 5 years ago, reposting old stale memes. Well, those are mostly bots, but out of 10,000 accounts, 55% are pawns. Then you have the knights. The knights are semi-auto AI skins with limited interaction used to spread FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And you can find many of these accounts, retweeters, a little more interactive. Then 12% are automated meme factories. 7% are fully controlled. And then 1% are deep cover accounts. These are the queens. So you have this model of a chessboard. Each piece represents a certain number of the bots or agents and operatives and how they're deploying them. And I've seen this myself with this, like the Q movement itself is really nothing more than a massive basically an information dump from a lot of bad actors pretending to be authentic. It's like a fake think tank, fake crowdsourcing intel. And it's full of lies and misinformation and manipulation. It's pretty bad. I saw one the other day. It was a picture of Ellen DeGeneres holding a girl. And someone in the comments said, oh, you have your pizza for the next sacrifice. And it's being shared. And people on the Q side of the fence are like, oh, we're going to get her. Others are saying, oh, don't worry. Ellen DeGeneres has already been executed in Guantanamo. They're always soothing themselves. They're always coping by talking about how the bad guys have already been murdered. Anyway, turns out that the screen share of Ellen DeGeneres and her sacrificial victim was actually manipulated, that the comments were fake. And moreover, that was her niece, and her niece is all grown up now. But to these 10,000 bot accounts interacting with it and sharing with it, it doesn't matter. It creates the perception that, oh, look, all these people believe it. So then the noob wanders in and they fall into a trap. They fall into an echo chamber. Joined by Mizelle says, I'm late. Yeah, I'm going to send out a new text alert list in case you're not on it, in case you've missed the sign up for text alerts. I'm going to be sending it out on the newsletter today. And it's really important, I think, that we maintain the numbers because the think tank is just that. And we need a lot of people in here really to correlate all this content. But I've been butting heads a little bit with the QAnoners simply because I've realized that there are so many unethical truthers. And lately I've been talking about how the world stage media, the MSM, they're liars. We know this. They are liars. That's what they do. Their starting point is a lie. However, the truthers who counter the liars aren't exactly always being truthful. If anything, these are controlled opposition points, and they're both subjective. Like, I don't think most truthers are objective enough to know the truth. That's what I'm saying. Like pre-2013, literally nobody that wasn't part of the PSYOP entertainment complex, nobody that wasn't an insider, an intelligence agent, or a high-level operative would have a clue about what the actual truth is about any of these psychological operations, because we didn't know. We didn't have the Sandy Crook operation to reveal just how deep this thing goes when it comes to media fakery. And that opened up the floodgates. And I'm just saying, we didn't have enough information to come to a complete picture, in 2012. But then at the end of the year, we kind of got that. And then it's been more or less mainstreamed among communities of conspiracy theorists who are now fully apprised of the existence of psychological operations, not the so-called, quote, false flags. My point is, it wasn't possible to be truthful before that. No matter how hard you tried, you would still be very subjective. Maybe you're not a conscious, deliberate liar, but you're in a world of lies. You're a truther in a world of lies. What does that mean? And there are no objectivists in the world outside of these auto hoaxer circles. The actual objectivists, the ones who read Ayn Rand's books, they are purely subjectivists. They all believe in NASA. They all believe the news. They have had their whole philosophy upended. Really, Apollo 11 destroyed it. But this is what I wrote a little piece here on liars and truthers, because so many truthers are abject liars. And I've been confronting them on Twitter. I actually had a QAnoner ask me to stop alienating the QAnoners. But here's what I've arrived at, starting with them. These types are A, liars, or B, delusional hopium addicts, or C, bots. And many share bad or debunked claims to support their general narrative. And this whole thing is so incoherent, contradictory, and rife with grifters. But I've noticed too that most of the egregious liars hide behind the name of God. So their intentions seem honest. They camouflage themselves, wolves in sheep's clothing, and they're spreading misinformation and lies. And the only reason why I point this out is that we have to point out hypocrisy. And we're always calling out the climate hoaxers, the climate change alarmists. We're always calling out the COVIDiots and the mask cucks for their hypocrisies. We can't give truthers a pass on it. And I'm just pointing it out, that for the most part, we have unaccountable hopium dealers who are feeding what I believe is a major league psyop. But whatever you think it is, I'm just saying that a lot of truthers are lying out of ignorance or inexperience with intellectually honest debate. Others lie for clicks and clout or pure ego gratification. Like, I think that it gives some people a feeling of empowerment. Not so many are lying out of malice, if you ask me. A lot of them are delusional or delusionists. And this is what happens. What happens is believers who don't fact check their beliefs become very entrenched in it. And then when you find that there's some knowledge that might dispel their beliefs, you're more or less viewed as an enemy. And I've noticed that a lot of truthers become hardcore believers instead of knowers. And this is an important thing because what happens is they defensively cling to debunked fantasies. And I think it's just a waste of time. It's a waste of your time, your cognitive ability. It's a waste of research resources to follow false leads. That's why we do things. That's why we have heuristics like fake until proven real, Occam's razor. This is why we do the media analysis we do. If you just accept everything at face value, like the normies do, you're lost in a world of pure subjectivity. Okay, let me go through your comments, see if I've missed anything. Right, somebody's talking about the maskers. Yeah, the mask phenomenon was a perfect example of how fashion can be used to spread ideology. I think if you compare the MAGA hat and the mask, these are two things that can show you that a lot of it's fashion. Ideology follows, but it's the symbols first. And that's why all the flag waving, that's why they do psyops. It's all about symbolism over substance when it comes to the mass mind, collectivizing people. Oswaldo says, Fepe's razor beak. Yeah, we ought to write one for that. I mean, you got Occam's razor, which very simply is, I mean, these are not replacements for investigation. These are just general rules. But when it comes to conspiracy theories, oftentimes we're asserting it's not the most obvious, but we have a different frame of reference as well. Like, for example, if you're going to say, oh, the most likely thing is the media is telling the truth. No, actually, that would be an exception to the rule. But we like Hitchens' razor is a great one because it just says that if something is posited with no evidence, you don't have to supply evidence to dismiss it. You don't have to debunk that which has not been bunked. I don't have to debunk anything that you claim if you haven't established that it actually exists. And what they cleverly do, and the mainstream media does this, and so do truthers, is, oh, you don't believe me, prove me wrong. I'm like, no. Prove yourself right first. That's the shifting of the burden of proof that forms the basis for the mainstream media's mind control. The instant you say, prove it first, you step outside of their realm. You pull your head out of their box. Kevin Mooring says the Trump derailing stories, Trump train. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good assessment there, because the train wreck in Ohio, the heart of it all, ties into this heart symbolism we've been seeing, but also capitalism caused it. Greed caused it. Deregulation by Trump caused the train wrecks. The train in the heart, the train tracks are the arteries. The capitalist system has clogged our arteries. That's why the trains are derailing. It's heart attacks. And the idea here of the Trump train derailing is just part of their narrative building, because ultimately it's capitalism derailing. That's what's happening. That's what the Ohio represents. That's what White Noise, the movie, represented. The movie White Noise preceded the train wreck. So just as a rule, if they can fake it in the movies, they can fake it on the news. One of the heuristics I refer to is the fakeability test. Before you can assert something is fake, you have to ask yourself, is it fakeable? A, and B, is it fakeable at scale? Like, yeah, they can fake gorillas. I mean, the dinosaur museum here has animatronic velociraptors. Yeah, you can fake things, but can you do it at scale? Like, there are people who say gorillas are fake. Well, no, there are some fake gorillas. You can rent a gorilla suit, but fakeable at scale across zoos, across the world, that's a big claim. And until you've tested your claim, we can just reject it. Like, you have to bunk your claim before asking us to debunk it. There are people like, oh, gorillas are fake, prove me wrong. It's like, I'm not going to go rip a mask off one of those things. Now, I mean, they're real enough. The fakeability test. Well, no, that's not fakeable at scale. And this is a very good time-saving device. You know, you can rule out, like, no, they can't fake tornadoes. They can exaggerate the effects. They can blame Republicans. But for the most part, well, I mean, I guess you could. Again, if you can fake it on TV, you can fake it on the news. That's certainly what happened in Ohio, though. Anybody who says there's no way that could have been faked, what do you mean? They just faked it for a movie, quite literally. And many of the actors in the movie, the extras, had to be evacuated from Palestine. And again, the name Palestine, yeah, where Bethlehem is, this is a biblical name for a reason. East Palestine. That's a tie-in to the apocalyptic narratives we've been given. Waco, American Apocalypse, came out on 3/22. A couple days later, Donald Trump hits the campaign trail in Waco. He says this is the final battle, an Armageddon reference. Again, Waco's where Alex Jones got his start. He helped rebuild the church where 33-year-old Dave Koresh, who thought he was Christ, burned to death. Again, another reference like Christopher Dorner, 33, Christ, Christopher, burns to death. And you know who else was radicalized at Waco? Timothy McVeigh, executed at 33, 6/11/2001, 90 days before Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker on 9/11, died at 33. Commenter says the Christmas Day bombing in Nashville, Anthony Q. Warner. Oh, yes, the Q. Warner. Yeah, look, I'm not ripping on Q believers. I'm deconstructing the PSYOP because it is a PSYOP. This isn't something that people are just making up. It's not a pure delusion. It's a real construct. I'm just saying it comes out of the White House, that it comes out of the Pentagon, that this QAnon movement is a psychological operation being waged on you. If you're a believer in it, you're actually a target. Okay, continuing. The apocalypse stuff is fascinating, though, because, and I'm watching this Waco American Apocalypse on Netflix. Like, what are the odds that a show on Waco is going to come out right as Trump hits the campaign trail? And I've already talked about the symbolism in Waco, and it all ties into 1/6. Because remember, Alex Jones got radicalized there, and one of his main talking points has been, they're going to take our guns. That's the turning point. And the book Turner Diaries that motivated Timothy McVeigh is about the turning point when they come for the guns. Well, in Waco, they had 1.6 million rounds. That's why the ATF came in. 1.6. January 6th, Alex Jones shows up at Waco, helps rebuild it. He goes to talk to Piers Morgan about the guns, and he says, the DHS bought 1.6 billion hollow point rounds. There's your 1.6 again. And he says, if they try to take our guns, 1776 will commence again. meaning revolution, turning point, revolution, turning point. Another 1.6 reference. Then January 6th happens. Alex Jones is in the lead. He's out there instigating. Alex Jones actually has the weapons from the 1/6 protesters at his house. And this is all because of the disputed election. And the disputed election involves a company called Dominion that sues Fox for $1.6 billion. All these 1.6s from Waco on up, and all these characters are involving Alex Jones, Dave Koresh. These are all building this meta narrative, and Trump here is in Waco. And again, I'm watching it on Netflix. And one of the things I learned here is Dave Koresh convinced his followers that they had to die to come back and lead the apocalypse, that they're going to come back with like X-Men Christ bodies and they're going to fight the New World Order. They really believe this. Kevin Mooring says, Jake Gyllenhaal made a new movie, Covenant. Yes, you know, the school where the trans gun person, the Christian school, killed those 6-year-olds to 9-year-olds, that was called Covenant. And then I see this Jake Gyllenhaal movie. And remember, the school Covenant, the address was like 33, the street address, 3 teachers, 3 students, a lot of 33s all over that one. And then this Jake Gyllenhaal movie, I see the commercial for Covenant, and he's got a 33 patch on his shoulder. Oswaldo says, Tucker is probably going to DJ the next major psyop in his future podcast gatekeeping gig. And look, I like Tucker Carlson. I like a lot of these individuals as entertainers, and I do understand where they're coming from on some of their viewpoints. But that's the nature of the controlled opposition, and I don't fault them for it. You know, maybe they're ignorant. In all likelihood, you're looking at very insulated people. Joined by Scotty Smith. Thank you for joining. Again, if you're not on text alerts, I'll send out text alert signups on the next newsletter. U.S. deploys more cyber. This is from RT. U.S. deploys more cyber commandos. Military hackers are at work in 20 countries, including Ukraine, a top general told reporters. Cyber commandos. Just the next iteration of keyboard warriors. Everything is so virtual these days. Everything is mediated. And that is the media itself. That is its purpose. It's to mediate your mind. It's not to inform you, it's to conform you. This is a quote from Carl Jung, who popularized synchronicity. And a lot of his symbolism is very pertinent to our discussions. He was an alchemist. And a lot of the symbolism we see pertains to the occult science of alchemy. But here's what Carl Jung said about organized religion. One of the main functions of organized religion is to protect people against the experience of God. And I'm like, that's fascinating, because in the modern context, the new religion, the one world order de facto state church is the mainstream media. That is your organized religion. Just replace the word religion with regimented worldview. And everything we get out of that black cube, out of that monolith, out of that box, it's to conform you to a worldview. It's a ball this size. It's heating up because the Republicans and the racist people are polluting the planet. We need to stop them. They have these narratives that everyone has to believe. And of course, it's a salvation narrative. Everybody has to be saved, or the devil's still running loose. It's a religion, complete with a new concept of sin, which is the virus. You got your heaven in outer space. You got your angry flood god. But I'm just, what he said here again, the main function of religion is to protect people against the direct experience of God. And I'm like, well, what is the main function of today's religion? Not to protect people from a direct experience of God, but a direct experience of reality. It has become, in fact, a filter. It's an augmented virtual reality, a fictional universe. And it takes you into a realm of subjectivity. If you're not an objectivist, you actually have a direct experience. It's mediated. Your cognition is somehow skewed in a way to slightly take you off of reality, or greatly, depending on which aspect of the false paradigm we're referencing. But the main function of religion is to mediate. Jake the asshole says, when you see an AI passenger plane get shot down in the news, that's when we're going to have a problem. They can say terrorists shot down the planes. Imagine all the laws they could pass then. Right? I mean, look what they did with CGI planes. And look, CGI planes, or not even CGI, could just be, video layering, an overlay. Just have another layer. However they do it, pre-filmed footage that is superimposed over a real-time event with a lot of military fog. We have explanations for all of this. But the main thing is the elite are able to use the theater of Psywar and stage magic in order to beguile the masses. And we are defenseless against bad CGI because the general public has been rendered visually illiterate. So he's right. Jake is 100% right. They can use CGI to fake something, and they don't even have to bring it for real. Like, sadly, you're not going to fight aliens in your neighborhood. The alien invasion is going to be CGI and actors somewhere way out there. Just like Kenosha or any of these psyops where it looks like it's real and there's a big mob. Well, you could have closed movie sets and scenes superimposed onto a real feed, even if it's so-called live streamed. Okay, continuing through my notes. We talked about this already from space.com. Potatoes are better than human blood for making space concrete. Good to know. For all of those who believe you're going to Mars. I mean, I like to ask people this, people who actually believe in like moon rocks. Do you believe in moon rocks? Because the moon rocks that we can examine are provably petrified wood. And I don't have to explain it. Like, this is a Hitchens razor moment. Oh, we went to the moon. Here's some moon rocks. Well, moon rocks are petrified wood, so I can dismiss your claim. I don't have to debunk the moon landing. You have to bunk it. And by the way, look at any lunar photography and try to find an eye-level view of the moon that has a horizon line that extends more than a few hundred yards. Like, where do they film the moon landing? Some parking lot somewhere? Because that moon is no bigger than the Walmart parking lot down the street. There's no moonscape. There's no lunarscape with miles and miles of craters. Nope. It's just a little set. It wouldn't be like that. The moon isn't that small. It's not a blimp. It's big. It's a quarter of the size the Earth is purported to be. And if you ever get out of your car in the middle of a night, or just on a road in Texas where things are, it's a flat plain, the land goes out as far as your eye can see. On the moon footage or photography, the moon disappears like 100. You could throw a baseball and it goes over the hump. It wouldn't be like that. And I found statements by Buzz Aldrin, who claims that he was disoriented because the horizon was bent. It was bendy. No, sorry. A human being on something a quarter the size of the Earth is still going to perceive it as a flat plane, going off as far as the eye can see. But there's no moonscape. Jake says they can't even make back to the moon according to their own story. Right. The limiting factor to me, I think it has to be CGI. Like, they want to get ahead with the graphics to pull this thing off. I mean, look what an embarrassment the ISS has become. You cannot be objective and tell me the ISS looks real. When you compare it to any sci-fi on Netflix, the movies look realer than the real thing. It's a funny conundrum here. And what's more, they can't just upgrade the special effects, because then people would notice how it was really bad a little while ago. Now it's pretty good. It's an embarrassment. Commenter says, I'll be in Discord after the voice stream. Yeah, I'm definitely. Feel free to join our Discord and get into the voice chat. I may even record some of our chats here in the near future if we have them topic oriented. Jake the A-hole says, putting men on the moon is the only technology that went in reverse. It used to be possible. And then, quoting Don Petit, we lost and destroyed that tech, and it's a painful process to build it back up. Well, Japan just launched an uncrewed probe to the moon and dropped off some materials. It's bad CGI. And I'm glad I don't have to pretend to believe it. I don't even say the Earth is blank. Like, I don't know. And I'm willing to say I don't know. And you can say, I know it's a ball made out of CGI. No, you can't say that. You can say you believe it, it's your faith, but you don't know it. You know people who claim to know it and you believe them, but that's hearsay. You basically have adopted a religion without knowing it, a set of beliefs. And these beliefs set your frame of reference, which they use against you to get you to think that the best life is to own nothing and to eat bugs and to live within 5 minutes of everything that you need and to really mitigate your carbon footprint and, to vax your mind so you don't spread mind viruses. Got a comment from Reprefrenative. Okay, it's got the Pepe the Frog with the Fren, F-R-E-N. He's talking about me on Twitter. He says, instead of ranting to 100 people max all day on his anti-Christian deranged podcast that has zero target audience, he alienates them all. LOL. Now, to interpret this was a person who said I need to stop knocking on QAnon, that I got to stop talking about Q because I'm alienating them. And he was suggesting that I'm deranged and anti-Christian. And I'm not anti-Christian at all. I'm not. In fact, I find that the religions, people are always like, oh, I'm not a religionist. I'm just a believer. Well, to be honest, I find that people who are part of religion are usually very pro-social. Doesn't matter what the God is or the book, just the organization, the churches, organized religion. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It's very pro-social. I don't have any negative things to say about people's religions. I'm just saying that the self-styled Christians who anonymously troll people on Twitter and have no allegiance to the truth, yeah, I call them out because there are so many of them, all these fake. I mean, what do you make of these individuals who wear it on their sleeve? They hit you over the head with a cross. They claim they're Christian. They Bible thump you to death, but then they spread misinformation and lies. I'm pretty sure lying is in the purview of the other guy, not God. All right, continuing, joined by JT33. Thank you for joining. R. Botten. Exalt says, Jake the a-hole, too bad Tim can't take calls. Yeah, I'll have him call in soon, or we'll arrange something separate. We can even record calls offline. The issue, again, is I got real spotty internet, and I'm pretty sure it would be garbage. And even the recording that you're hearing now isn't as good as what you're going to get in the archives because I record on my iPhone separately. I came across a bit of intrigue here. Last week, we were talking about the groomer, Ollie Alexander, who's the organizer of the Stop the Steal protest on 1/6. Interestingly enough, it turns out that a lot of people didn't go to DC because they were warned about Ollie. Now, again, Ollie Alexander uses blackmail to put people into positions within the conservative movement, within the Republican Party. He's a Karl Rove operative and reported lover. No judgment. You want to make out with Karl Rove, be my guest. My point of it is he's connected to all these powerful people, but he's also known to extract blackmail material for people. He calls it, quote, collateral. He reportedly offered jobs to people at InfoWars if they gave him collateral, which means basically nude pics of yourself, doing lewd things that could instantly destroy your credibility or something, like OnlyFans content. It's like the GOP has its own secret OnlyFans account, and it's just all of its own members. It's the weirdest thing. It's a circular firing squad of mutually blackmailed political climbers who hate each other secretly. Ollie Alexander should be in prison, or he should be under investigation simply for the fact that he has blackmail material on MTG, Marjorie Three Names. He has blackmail material on a U.S. representative. That's a big deal. Anyway, it has come to my attention here, and I found this on Twitter, that a lot of people didn't go because they heard that Ollie Alexander had his, quote, Team Orange. And this is all interesting. What is this Team Orange? Apparently, a lot of the people around him, and you can find them in the protests, were the instigators. Here's a quote from Stale Crumbs. Ollie Alexander is a Karl Rove operative. Not only that, He was part of the 1-6 operation to create an impression that there was a so-called insurrection. And I'm going through these videos, and I am finding what people are digging up here, that there's a lot of content showing that you had a coordinated group of individuals who were clearly working with insiders to record their instigations, but they were identifiable by orange tags, orange helmets, orange beanies. This reminds me of the Boston Hoaxathon at 666 Boylston Street. You know, when you had the smoke come out and all these individuals with hoodies and cowboy hats came out and they did the operation itself. They applied the special effects. They applied the fake blood and everything else. Well, that to me is what you would expect. They'd have some way to identify themselves, like the guy that's going to give you the prosthetic leg, the guy with the theatrical blood. If you remember the Boston subway shooting last year with Frank James fired 33 bullets into the only subway car without a camera. Well, there was a person in a red trench coat dropping off blood bags. Anyway, who's Team Orange? What role did they play on January 6th? Again, Stop the Steal. Ollie Alexander was part of a group called Team Orange. And I'm looking at all the pictures and videos, and this is all new to me. I'm just now digging into it, but people have been doing some serious research into it. And it appears like he was an insider. In other words, controlled opposition. And Ollie Alexander is friends with and close to, of course, everyone at InfoWars. He's best buddies with Nick Fuentes. With Ye, he was going to be one of Ye's presidential. I mean, think about that. How high up in politics? Let's just say that Ye somehow became president. Ollie would be right there. Ollie Alexander, Scammy Davis Jr. All right, continuing. Going through your comments, Exalt says, JT33, love your music. Everyone sub to JT33. Yes, once I get back into my headquarters, we'll be playing music again. I've been wanting to hear Gaia's Revenge for some time. One of JT33's best tracks. All right, well, there's a lot going on. We've been talking about the symbolism of Jamie Foxx, 55, dying and resurrecting, and how that comports with all of the other dying and resurrecting martyr scripts that we've seen. May Day is coming up in about 4 days. May Day is a major communist holiday, International Workers' Day. The last day of April is all on the occult calendar. It's Beltane. I actually think that's why they burned the dragon at Disneyland. Pretty sure that the burning dragon was some kind of a Beltane fire. But just a heads up, there's going to be some type of escalation, I imagine. Seems like every May Day, there's some kind of gathering at the Washington Mall, some type of protest movement kicks off. And this thing with Jamie Foxx and how it ties in to Trayvon Martin, Emmett Till, and then Emmett Till's accuser dies today. Taken together, big picture, the Gestalt, I think we're being prepped for some type of martyr psyop, and Trump's a part of it. You know, you see how he was Christified. How it's going to play out, I'm not exactly sure, but I do expect that May Days when we should expect some type of an escalation. If you want to get into our Discord server, go to patreon.com/Infinite Plane Society. Get on the text alerts, get on the Discord server, and remain in the know about the goings on at the think tank. River Stick says May Day is the start of the Bohemian Illuminati, 1776. Right. Very significant day. Also, the Church of Satan, last day of April. That's their founding date. We're at the opposite side of the year as Halloween, but this is like the real major holiday. All right, going through my Discord server. I watched the South Korean president sing American Pie. There may be some significance in it. I mean, maybe we're reading too much into it. Not quite sure, but it just seems like anything that's on the stage has some relevance or may have relevance in the future. Whistleblower to tell White House that the U.S. government is a middleman in a multi-billion-dollar migrant child trafficking operation. Yeah, that's the Democrat Party. Nothing new there. World star hip hop. Jamie Foxx reportedly had to be revived after a stroke on set. Doctors say he's lucky to be alive. Again, death, resurrection, Jamie Foxx, Django Unchained, Christopher Dorner, Emmett Till. These are all very well, strongly correlated. BLM, civil rights. It's all building to something. We've talked about Tucker Carlson's firing. And is he a fake populist? Is he the real thing? Is he a brick in the wall? Does it represent some kind of victory for the so-called people? No, I don't think so. Whenever there's a need for a hero, we supply them. Isn't that what Albert Pike said? Confederate general, author of the Masonic ritual degrees from 4 to 33. Kevin Mooring says Machine Gun Kelly just turned 33 on Saturday. Machine Gun Kelly's the one who's dating Megan Fox. Again, Fox adds to 666, F is 6, O is 15, 1 plus 5 is 6, X is 24, 2 plus 4 is 6. Megan 666 and Machine Gun Kelly, MGK, magic with a K, how the occultists spell it. And I think they're into drinking each other's blood and stuff like that as well. Kevin Mooring says, American Pie is the American dream dying. Well, this is what the big martyr story is about, this Black Christ symbolism we're seeing. George Floyd, Jayland Walker, Trayvon Martin, all of them. Martin Luther King, the symbolism with Rodney King or Tyree Nichols. We're seeing the martyrdom of the ultimate victim of this system, of the West, of capitalism. Not just the physical brutality necessitated to defend the property class, but also the disproportionate effect that climate change has on the poor. And of course, it's caused by the rich. This is a narrative, it's a story. The people who write the news are the ones who wrote the Bible, if you ask me. That's how far back this control system goes. And they're writing stories that will control minds, that will shape worldviews for generations. That's why they bring these things back. Jamie Foxx is in the news, Trayvon Martin, Emmett Till reference, and then Emmett Till's accuser just happens to die. Her death at 88, maybe that means something, I don't know, but again, these are all just the facts as they report them. The Herald Sun reports that the number of people who worship the devil has doubled in Australia, with Victoria emerging as the country's satanic capital. Again, major satanic holiday coming up. If you're in Boston, I think you can go meet up with the Temple of Satan. That's the above ground group that claims that they don't believe in Satan. They just have a church of Satan to make a point about religious freedom. Makes perfect sense. And that's what you would expect. They probably hide it until you get higher up. Their leader's name is like Lucian, and he's got the one eye thing. The one eye symbolism is always a big part of this cult. And I don't think it's a contact lens. We're joined by Baja Pickleball. Yes, Celestial Wonders, Jerry Springer, rest in peace. I don't assume every celebrity death to be fake or staged. Like I said, there's the fakeability question. Is it fakeable? Yes. But then along with that question in your assessment, is there a reason? Is there an obvious political agenda? Is there an angle to it? And usually it's there. Like I mentioned Jayland Parker, because this is a fascinating story. He's shot by 8 cops 46 times, obvious George Floyd reference. The next day, the Patriot Front fights some protester, and the photograph of this protester who's black being held up by Patriot Front guys with their shields and their masks, they look like Roman soldiers. He looks like a black Christ. Then I saw the name Jay Walker, and I'm like, watch. This is going to tie into some police profiling angle about non-crimes that get overly prosecuted in a racially discriminatory way. That was my prediction because of his name, Jay Walker. Well, later that year in California, Governor Newsom had decriminalized jaywalking because it was apparently being used disproportionately to target people racially, or so they say. Again, systemic racism, intrinsic to our system. That's the point they were making. And again, shooting him 846 is just a clear tie into George Floyd, another martyr reference. That was in Akron, Ohio. Akron means, I believe it means high point. Just interesting terminology there, because so many of these shootings involve like Highland Park, Parkland High, and we're noticing a lot of names and stuff that reference a high point or peak. Not sure what it all means, but we catalog this stuff. Exalt says the Temple of Satan Satanists support women's shelters, highway cleanup, addiction recovery centers. A big issue, the temple's built on abortion rights, and they launched a telehealth clinic in New Mexico. Yeah, I've always looked at the Temple of Satan as basically liberals cosplaying. That's pretty much it, because their agenda is just the liberal platform. It's mostly abortion, women's rights, probably protect trans kids. Everything that you find on the left that's outraging the right, they're pretty much for. It's a political group. It's not the same one from the 60s. And that one was, how would you describe that one? I mean, they were more unabashedly, openly practitioners of Satan worship. In fact, the Church of Satan had some interesting connections, like the Charles Manson killings. Well, the one who killed Susan Atkins, the one who killed Sharon Tate was Susan Atkins. Susan Atkins was one of Anton LaVey's topless dancing witch strippers and priestesses. You can find pictures of her dressed like a vampire, but she's topless, coming out of a coffin. And she was the one who did the Manson killings. So there's some connections there. Apparently, the Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, attended mass at the Church of Satan before his killing spree. Interesting connections, just a few there. David Hogg tweeted this today, a couple of days ago. I have accepted a job with the FBI, helping them with school shootings. Fascinating. Helping them with school shootings. Well, his dad's FBI. His grandfather's a Freemason. He wears his grandfather's Masonic lapel pins. A little disingenuous to say he accepted a job with the FBI. I mean, he did kind of have a job with them when he was a child actor as Adam Lanza at Sandy Crook, back when he had his bowl cut. Parkland was also, I would consider to be him working as a Fed, basically, helping them with school shootings. And then his work as an activist doing die-ins where they play dead in grocery stores. Yeah, he was working for the FBI this whole time, is what I'm saying. We talk about deep fake all the time. I found something, and you can find my links at minds.com/Infinite Plane Society. Back in 1964, I found deep fake tech involving boots, where they had regular boots with a special sole to leave traces of bare footprints to confuse local populations. We talk about deep fake technology here a lot, and the general public thinks deep faking involves CGI, filters, AI generated content. No, the deep fakery involves stagecraft, anything stagecraft, synthetic masks, special effects, and it involves the newer kind. But they focus on the digital deep fakery to hide the fact that we were already born in a deep faked universe. Deep fake isn't coming. They're not going to deep fake us to death. They're not going to hijack society with deep fakery. And no, they did that already. We have been deep faked, and it's been going on for generations, not just since the inception of mass media, but really religion. The original form of deep fakery, I think, has to do with the formation of cults, which generally involve some kind of mythological basis. And look at the movie The Village. If you want to, you can't find a better example than that. The elite keep everybody in the village by convincing them that there's monsters surrounding the village. Then they wear monster costumes and run around in the woods at night to maintain the fear. All deep fakery, fear-based mind control. JT33 says, did you see Biden scratch the back of his rubber neck? Yes. I saw his neck crease and it stayed that way. I noticed too, there is definitely a lobes and a no lobes Joe. Don't know how that works. Sometimes he has earlobes, sometimes he does not. CGI Joe. I still think, and this is just based on my assessment of his skull, I think that Joe Biden is Beau Biden. in a mask. Beau Biden supposedly died at 46 like Kennedy, like George Floyd actually too. He supposedly died at 46. And then his father becomes president number 46. And when Joe Biden accepted the candidacy, he said, it should have been Beau, and he cried. If you remember Joe Biden crying about how it should have been Beau, Beau wasn't going to run for office. He wasn't going to be president. How was that even a possibility? It was like a joke. Because again, look at Vice President Joe Biden, President Joe Biden. Look at their skulls. Now look at Beau Biden in the middle. And you might agree with me that Joe Biden as vice president's skull would not fit in whoever this new Joe Biden is. It's not the same. But Beau Biden's skull, it's a match. I think that Beau Biden, with his brain tumor dying at 46, I think it's symbolic of the head injury, the crown injury, like Kennedy at 46. That's all symbolic. Death, resurrection, becomes president at 46. It's my guess. I just think that symbolically and otherwise, specifically the skull shape, I think that Joe is Beau. Salty Siren says rubbernecking. Well, it looked to me like it was definitely not just skin that's lost elasticity. He literally pulled the back of his rubber neck thing up. And what's with Kamala Harris's mask? Like the neck is like 3 sizes too large. They got to tighten that thing up. You know, it's like, oh, it's not as bad as the CEO of Pfizer. Have you seen that guy's neck? It inflates like a frog when he talks, or reptilian, I should say. All right, let's see. This is just some notes I picked up here. Make sense of it if you can. Keanu Reeves, Neo, Christ symbolism there. He even dies for 72 seconds, symbolizing 72 hours, 3 days. Trin wakes him up. Again, Keanu Reeves, Neo, The Matrix. His birthday is 9/11. His passport expires on 3/11. All very symbolic stuff there. But more recently, he's John Wick, and that has all kinds of savior symbolism. And this is during Holy Week, where I see this John Wick is peaking at number 1. So I'm just pointing it out. Keanu Reeves has this savior archetype attached to him. And then I'm looking at like Superman. And George Reeves, played the first one. George Reeves was the Superman. Savior archetype. Man from space saves the world. Christopher Reeves, an S, Superman, savior archetype. Again, I'm looking at the Reeves thing. Then you have Elon Reeve Musk, world savior, taking us to Mars when we finish destroying the planet. Not quite sure what the connections are, except here's the thing. George Reeves, it is believed by me and others, didn't really die after getting shot by a bullet, a 45. And even his death was under very mysterious circumstances. I think George Reeves' death was fake. And he came back as Werner von Braun. Look at Werner von Braun and George Reeves side by side. Same guy. I think he's a total construct. Werner von Braun is a Disney creation, an actor. His accent is terrible. It's fake. But this makes a lot of sense to me because it's the Reeves is a clue here. Because it's Werner von Braun, Mars, a technical tale, introduces Elon as the dictator on Mars. And here you have Elon Reeve Musk coming out. Again, these are just clues, I think, that you can find in the names. Kevin Mooring says, isn't Hitler Walt Disney? I've seen some pictures, but I've seen a few pictures also of the compound Hitler died in compared to Disney's home. Not outside the realm of possibility. We live in a Disney universe. We live in a Poe world order. It's all a bunch of Poes. Parodies of extremism. Okay, we talked about the firing of Don Lemon. Here's something else. Ray Epps. Again, Ray Epps, January 6th, Fed, who's called out as such. His daughter outed him as a pedo. Ray Epps. Why is that not surprising? And you can look at his close relationship to Baked Alaska. You can look at how close all these characters are to groomers at the top of American nationalism. All throughout the Republican Party, there's a ring there's a black male ring. And Ray Epps is not far from these individuals. He may pretend like he's an outsider. They may make it seem like he's not one of them. No, it's a Fed calling a Fed a Fed. And I think they're all similarly compromised sickos. Celestial Wonder says, I'm grateful to be walking the middle path with y'all. Yeah, I would say we're almost on the outside. This is why we chose the symbol of the penguin. Because if the Earth is not a ball, then Antarctica is a lie, as construed. That perhaps it just represents the outer boundary. And what is the unofficial mascot of Antarctica? The penguin. And the penguin would represent the perspective of being on the outside fringe, so you can see the inside, but also being in a position to see what is on the outside, what they're not showing you. So they're the perfect insider outsiders. And I thought, let's use this as a symbol for those who are seeking more information than the limited world view that we've been given. So the left and the right are on a continuum, and it's actually a circle. The center is actually just equally subjective and deceived as the left and right. Like there is no real objective middle. The real objectivity is on the outside, which is where we are. And I like that term, outsider, or rather, I like the terminology better than the middle, because we're not trying to average out two extremes. We're stepping outside of their controlled dialectic, outside of their poles. And of course, the two poles that they use to manipulate, and then you get the two poles on the ball. It's all very fascinating. But again, the penguin thing also symbolizes the countering of the ignorance, the darkness, the darkness of space. To me, that represents the ignorance of what's outside of our constrained world. The ice of Antarctica, similarly, on the globe, the ice in the North Pole, these would represent the unknowns, off limits to the slaves. We can't go there. We're just told it's ice. I'm just saying the ice and darkness are symbols of ignorance or even deliberate obfuscation. And so the penguins are known to form into huddles where they breathe in the middle to heat up the air. And penguins walking in rotation, beaks in, can create a pocket of warm air up to like 96 degrees. And it gets so hot that they have to rotate breathers as they conspire. They breathe together. And, conspire, breathe together. And what we're doing is we're really conspiring against the ignorance, the encroaching darkness, the freezing of thought. And our conversations, our conspiring is melting or heating or countering the cold. Of course, that's kind of the metaphor here. The penguin huddle. When penguins walk across the land, they call them a waddle. But when they're in the water, they call them a raft. Anyway, if you want to get the signal, which is a text alert, whenever we summon the raft, get on the newsletter. Just go to patreon.com/Infinite Plane Society. Sign up for a month free trial, $1 a month if you just want to get in for the newsletter and the live links and the Discord access and the text alerts. Appreciate all the comments, as always. I'll send out archives shortly after, and we'll likely be in Discord here talking about this and everything else that's going on. So everyone have a great day.